Welcome back, everyone. This is Free School Black Studies, the Learning Series. I'm Professor Dee Booth, and I'm your learning facilitator and guide for today. This is the fourth of 6 videos in a lecture series. Our goal has been to understand or to develop an understanding of Black studies through liberation questions. And each week we have taken a figure of Black studies to help us think through those liberation questions. Last week, we analyzed Kwame Ture's life, his politics, and call for revolutionary Pan-Africanism. And today, we study a figure who would more reliably refer to herself as a performer. She really resisted the label of an activist, yet she is among the most important political figures to come out of South Africa and onto the world stage in the 20th century. And this is true because not only of the prominence of her performance career, and it was quite prominent, but also because of her Pan-Africanist political work, and certainly because of her consistent condemnation of South Africa's racist system of exploitation and apartheid. Okay. And so I'm speaking of the South African singer and artist known as Miriam Makeba. Though often soft spoken in her public interviews, Makeba was truly a political force. And this political force can be detected if we look more closely. And so one of the places that we can see that is actually in her own autobiography. And so we'll start there. Let's see if I can get the first slide up here. There we go. Right. So in the opening lines of her own autobiography, she says this, quote, "If given a choice, I would have certainly selected to be what I am, one of the oppressed instead of one of the oppressors. But in truth, I had no choice. And in a sad world where there are many victims, I can take pride that I am also a fighter. My life, my career, every song I sing, every appearance I make are bound up with the plight of my people. I have been denied my home. We have been denied our land. I have watched my family diminish as relatives are killed by soldiers. We have seen our best blood spilled in Sharpeville, Soweto, Crossroads. I am in exile on the outside, but we are exiled on the inside. But there are 3 things I was born with in this world, and there are 3 things I will have until the day I die: hope, determination, and song. These things I also hold in common with my people. If you believe, as I do, that every man and woman is an object of wonder and joy in the heart of the superior being, then it is not too much to expect that someday all wrong will be righted and justice will prevail. We all want the same thing: a decent life, peace, love. This is not politics. It seems to me this is common sense. I have never been to a university, but I do have common sense." These words, written in 1987, preface to her autobiography called Makeba, A Story. She's doing something important here. She's revealed what made her more than just a popular singer and a South African celebrity. First, she asserted that her life was one intricately and consistently connected to the fate of her people, the oppressed people of South Africa. Note that she wrote from her narrative in exile, an exile that at the time of this book was published was 27 years long. So she was immediately telling her audience that despite the fame, she has remained among the oppressed. And yet, Makeba is not opening her life story with despair. Instead, she's telling you that she has been a fighter and remains a fighter. And she's using song as a powerful weapon. So from the very beginning of her life narrative, Makeba tells you how to read her as a freedom fighter, although she doesn't claim that title of activist. This next slide here. Oops, go back. There we go. Now, when I think of Zenzi Miriam Makeba, I think of a famous quote by a Black singer and musician, Nina Simone. Might have heard her, right? Simone, who was friends with Malcolm X and knew Makeba for years, said this quote, an artist's duty, as far as I'm concerned, is to reflect the times. And at this crucial time in our lives, when everything is so desperate, when every day is a matter of survival, I don't think you can help but be involved. This is Nina Simone, right? And when I hear this quote, I think of it in relation to the life and work of Makeba, because her life journey to me illustrates the spirit of the times. Through her, I see a zeitgeist of African descended people of the 20th century getting into the action of attacking their chains, of coming into a state of consciousness that is a state of consciousness that calls for direct confrontation as the truest way to free themselves from their bondage. And I say African descended, not South African, because Makeba's life speaks to the Black freedom struggle on multiple continents. So, in our attempt to understand the significance of the life journey of Makeba in Black studies, I'm going to break this talk down into three parts, two major parts and one minor part. The first part is called The Fight in South Africa. And it's meant to give us a general sense of what life was like for Makeba being born and growing up Black and female in South Africa. It's really important to understand that context. The second part is called The Fight in Exile. And this is meant to give us some general sense for life for Makeba and her places of exile. Third is a final part in a coda, and it's called Liberation Lessons of Miriam Makeba, which is meant to simply open the door for our discussion question for this week. So that's the roadmap. Let us get into it. Zinzile Miriam Makeba was born March 4th, 1932 in Prospect Township. And it's a place not too far from the major South African city of Johannesburg, right? Nicknamed Joburg for short. From the beginning of her life, Makeba dealt with tribulation because of the racial oppression in South Africa. Makeba explains that at just 18 days old, she and her mother were put in jail for illegally brewing beer. Now, her mother had made this alcohol to sell because she's supplementing the family's income. Because under the racially oppressive laws and customs of South Africa at this time, Black people as a group were pushed into very low wage work and often poverty wages. So Makeba wrote about this incident and she said, quote, when I'm 18 days old, the police raid our house. They discover the Mgombothi. My mother is taken away and I am in her arms. She is told she must pay an 18-pound fine or go to jail for 6 months. My father cannot scrape up 18 pounds. It is impossible. He stands bleakly at the jailhouse door and watches his wife and baby daughter go away from him for half a year. So here we see already the kinds of catastrophes that can happen from poverty, right? They're taking risks by making the beer, right? They get caught, and they don't have money to begin with. This is why they're brewing the beer, right? So they certainly don't have the money for them to be able to free themselves from this jail, and there's no one to take young Makeba, and so she has to go to jail with her mother, right? And So we get an early sense of the struggle that Black South Africans and really many non-white South Africans in general are dealing with. Okay, so unfortunately, explicit state oppression is not the only hardship that a young Makeba is going to face. Her father dies of an illness when she's just 6 years old, and she's sent to live with her grandmother so that her mother can continue to work. At her grandmother's compound, Makeba found love and care among family, yet the family's home space, their compound, lacked the full protection that you would assume at night, and it was because of regular police raids. Makeba recalled, quote, "The policemen in their brown uniforms force their way inside. Pass, they shout, pass. I press myself against the wall with my cousins and shiver in my bedclothes as I stare at these men. The only white men I have ever seen have been the policemen who enter our ghetto. These men are Afrikaners. The English do not like to be policemen. Pass. They're checking for passbooks and looking for illegal residents. An African's passbook determines where he or she will live. If we travel, we must get permission from the ministry. We cannot go across town without a permit. A Black without a valid passbook goes to jail. With time, I will get used to the police breaking in during the middle of the night to check up on us, to keep us off balance. It is their way of keeping us down." So here we get some sense of the great power that the state has over Black people, right? Tightly controlling their movements with these documents, right? Do you have the right to be in space, right? And if they determine that you don't, then they put you in jail, right? So jail is an ever-present possibility. And of course, Makeba knows that because she was in it from the time that she was an infant, right? Okay, so Makeba suggests that she gets used to the police breaking in, but she doesn't ever really accommodate to the oppression. She just manages to survive, and she survives into her teenage years. And then at 17 years old, Makeba falls in love, right? Then she unexpectedly became pregnant by her boyfriend when he forced her to have sex. Being pregnant and still feeling strongly for the young man, she decided to marry him. However, it wasn't long before Makeba chose to leave that marriage because her husband turned out to be physically abusive and cheated on her with her own sister. So it was not a very good situation. So she chooses to leave. Seeking refuge from the tumult from her personal life, Makeba turned to performing in the community and was increasingly recognized for her talent. It gave her opportunities to travel around South Africa and even outside the country in Southern Africa. However, her travels and talent did not stop her exposure to threats of state violence. It actually multiplied it. For example, one day when she was out with her group mates, she was touring and she had this experience. Quote, "One night, we're traveling from Pretoria to Johannesburg. Our buses passed the international airport, and a moment later, we're stopped by the police. Two young men order us out. The policemen search the car, looking for anything from alcohol to weapons. Guns and knives are illegal for a Black to possess, of course. The policemen are irritated that they cannot find anything. Nathan steps forward and says, 'Here are our night passes.' Nathan has made a bad mistake. He has spoken to the policemen in English. There are no English policemen, only Afrikaners, and they hate the English. We hold our breaths. The young policeman is stern. 'Can't you speak Afrikaans?' Nathan apologizes. He explains who we are and says we are returning from a performance. It is sad to see this tall, proud, and handsome man forced to humble himself before two blonde pimpleheads in uniform. 'You say you are a singing group,' one of the policemen asks in a sarcastic manner. I wonder what's going to happen since he can do anything he pleases with us. Okay, then, he says, sing. And they make us sing. The Manhattan Brothers, one of the country's top groups, is forced to stand beside the road in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the night, and serenade two arrogant white kids who are probably police because they're too dumb to be anything else. Nothing is more humiliating than this. Experiences, having a gift, being very prominent in society, and she is finding that status is not helping to protect them from the racism of the society. Okay. Oh, let's see. We skip ahead here. There we are. Okay. So the worsening apartheid structure in policing were emotionally and physically devastating to Makeba, right? She wrote this. She said, quote, there are times when each African wonders how much longer we can stand living the way we do as subhumans. The whites do not want to treat us like human beings because it's easier to keep us down if they think we're animals. But we know we are human beings and we know we're as good as anybody. We also know that something has got to happen. There is only so much anger, resentment, pain, and fear that can build up in a person before there is an explosion. Here in this quote, Makeba is reading her society as a powder keg that was just ready to blow. But Makeba also noticed this important political development at that same time. She wrote, quote, one night we perform at a place where some men are meeting to try to keep that explosion from happening. They want change, but change through nonviolent means. I recognize the group's flag when I enter the hall. It's three colors. Its three colors are black, green, and gold. The black represents the African people. The green is for our fertile country. And the gold represents our land's great mineral wealth. Black, green, and gold, the colors of Africa, and the colors of the African National Congress. Over 40 years ago, the ANC was founded by the same type of Black lawyers and educators who are meeting this day. After the Manhattan Brothers perform, we are introduced to them. I'm very shy. Politics is something I know nothing about. I curtsy and do not look the men directly in the face when we shake hands. There is a bearded young man with a kind, round face to whom I showed the same respect. His name is Nelson Mandela, and he says he enjoys my singing. I thank him and quickly leave because everyone is busy with something called the Freedom Charter. In this document, these men are about to declare, quote, South Africa belongs to all who live in it, Black and white, end quote. This is revolutionary. I fear the government is going to shoot them all. So in 1950, here we have a youthful Miriam Makeba who is hurt by the injustices of the society and believes that things are reaching a tipping point, reaching that boiling point. But she's mostly just scared of what might happen next. Soon, however, though, Makeba would make a series of choices that would make her an active agent in South African history. Fast forward to 1958, right? So we get to 1958. There is a fortuitous series of events that place 26-year-old Makeba in a secret documentary film called Come Back Africa. So what do I mean by secret? Well, a person who is not a South African is filming this documentary and the government does not want him to do it. And so they have these cameras and it's all very low key. They're doing these things on the low. So she participates in this, right? And she has a role, a singing role, and it's brief, very brief, but she sings very powerfully. And so when the film is released a year later in 1959, it's a hit. In fact, Time magazine in the United States called it one of the best films of the year. Specifically in this film, Makeba's performance captivates people. And so she's asked by the filmmaker to travel to England and then London, I'm sorry, to London, England, and to Italy to promote the film. So she goes to these film festivals, and people are just excited to meet her and learn more about the film and about her country. While she's in London, Makeba meets Harry Belafonte. And Harry Belafonte is a important musician and even activist in the United States. And he helps to arrange for her travel and for her to perform in the United States. So by daring to participate in this film and to go out and support it internationally, Makeba has unknowingly positioned herself to become a world famous star. Okay. So a few months later, 1960, Makeba finds herself living and gigging in New York City. Pretty soon after that, she makes arrangements to get her daughter from South Africa, and very sadly learns soon that her mother has died. After news of her mother's death, she wants to return home. She wants to see her mother, see her mother's gravesite, essentially, because the funeral had already taken place. But when she attempts to go home to honor her mother, the South African government marks her passport invalid, making it impossible for her to return home because she has no credentials anymore. And this begins her period of exile. And Makeba wrote of this saying this, quote, "I flee the building. I do not dare ask questions because I know the answer. If I go back home now, jail awaits me. It is the same for anyone the authorities do not want. They are displeased with me. I have gone too far. I have become too big. Maybe they fear I will speak out against them. I have not said a word about politics in all the newspaper stories that I have been printed about me, but I am still dangerous." Now, these words are important to understand. Makeba is a political figure, right? And so, and we can understand this because she's already saying, literally, I have not said a word about politics, but I am still dangerous. That means that she has the ability to shift, as the politicians like to say, hearts and minds, right? She's influential. Okay. Right. What else makes her dangerous? Well, Makeba is a global singing star. Right. She has gone into spaces of high society, some of the most elite social spaces in the world. And she has done so with her skill, competence, and with dignity. By engaging in her craft and sharing it with audiences, she has insisted on and demonstrated her humanity. In other words, her assertion of her own humanity contradicts the logic of white supremacy and apartheid. So she's proving her dignity, she's proven her personhood, and in doing so, it makes her persona non grata as far as the South African authorities are concerned. And it is a painful experience, this exile that is, at that point, only just beginning. Okay, so let's move to the next part 2, the fight in exile. So, as Miriam Makeba Kaba's professional star is rising, she powerfully demonstrates her humanity and the humanity of her people through performing songs of all types. And increasingly, she gained the courage to tell her own stories of her life in South Africa. And so here on the screen, I have a short clip of an example of her doing just that. So let's listen a bit.
Miriam Makeba, what had the situation been for you as an entertainer if you had still been living in South Africa?
Well, I don't think there would have come anything out of it. And that's one of the reasons that I left South Africa, because there was just no scope for me as a Black entertainer, in that there are places which are reserved only for whites and white entertainers. For instance, for many years, we were not allowed to drink and therefore we were not allowed to perform in nightclubs where liquor was being served. And those nightclubs were only open to white South Africans and not to the Black people. And for a time there, we could perform in the theaters, but in 1958, the government passed a new law that no Africans could perform in the cities, in any of the city halls, and so forth. And that's why I left in 1959.
I guess that in a country where so many people have been oppressed for such a long time, there must exist music that is especially was born because of that, against the.
Oh yes, we have many so-called protest songs and revolutionary songs, which are banned, by the way, now in South Africa. Many we used to sing in schools, for instance. There's one called Hayusizi Lomtomnyama. And this song used to be performed in Eistedt forts in schools, where schools used to compete. But now it's illegal to sing that song. And many of the songs have been banned off the radios and all the radio stations in South Africa. And also the record shops are not allowed to sell the records. My records, for instance, have been banned since 1962. In South Africa, they don't sell them anymore. People who have them just have to play them privately and hope that nobody that shouldn't hear them hears them. And even though they are banned, but there are some people who still sing them somehow, somewhere. And I sing some of them, but I find it difficult rather to sing these kind of songs when I'm working in places like Burns, for instance, and also even in concerts, because I usually find that when people pay to come and hear an entertainer, they usually don't want to be reminded of the ugly things in this world. They get away to come and enjoy themselves, and I usually feel I shouldn't hit them on the head with a hammer. So I always try to inject a little message here and there, subtly if I can, because not everybody feels the same way that I do.
Okay, we'll stop it right about there. But from this footage, you can hear that Makeba gently but certainly explains South African oppression. It is a powerful but soft-spoken attack on that system. Okay. Now, as South African atrocities grow, Makeba becomes more emboldened to speak her mind. For example, in 1963, she was invited to address the United Nations about the South African regime. And to this important global political body, she read remarks prepared by the ANC, which addressed the infamous massacre at Sharpsville that had occurred in 1960. In this heinous incident, the South African state forces fired their guns on unarmed fleeing protesters, many of whom were children and women. And they had been protesting to oppose something called a passbook. And these were the devices used to control the movement of non-white people in the country. And so Makeba reads the statement that is detailing this and other problems and injustices. And also in that statement calls for an international boycott of South Africa. And so it was a very powerful use of the international political stage. In the 1960s, as African nations rapidly decolonize or aim to decolonize, Makeba engaged in Pan-African politics. Indeed, she was present in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia when the Organization of African Unity was founded in 1962. She's right there on the scene. But frequently, Makeba traveled the Pan-African world with and through her music. And she traveled to various African nations, and she was cheered and appreciated for her artistry and global prestige, for she was an African that made other Africans feel proud. Back in the United States, in about the late 1960s, Makeba had come to learn more intimately about Black American race struggles. Indeed, she had been a regular presence in New York City when she heard the news of Malcolm X's assassination. And it happened that she was in Los Angeles in 1965 when the Watts rebellions lit up the sky. She saw them, right? In 1967, Makeba accepted an opportunity to be a performing guest for President Sekou Toure in Guinea, West Africa. And this would be fateful. For on this trip, she met Stokely Carmichael, and the two began a romance that became a marriage. However, at this point, 1967, Stokely Carmichael was either famous or infamous, depending on who you asked, because he had spread this political message of Black power starting in 1966. So he is has a highly controversial status in mainstream America, and he strongly and his relationship, their marriage, strongly and negatively affects Makeba's popular music career in the United States. Worse, she also becomes subject to the intense state-sponsored surveillance that Carmichael had already been under. And so with these conditions, the couple decide to move to Guinea at the invitation of President Sekou Toure in 1968. From her new base in Guinea, Makeba continued to sing her songs, performing around the world in the 1970s and into the 1980s. And so, to give you some sense of the kind of things that she's doing during this period, here's a video showing Makeba in her element. You'll see that she's singing a song. It's written by her only child, daughter, Bongo Makeba, and she's surrounded by children, which was often she liked to entertain people, but she especially loved to serve children. And so you'll see her surrounded by children, including her grandson, who is playing the piano. So let's just take a quick look here.
My people, open your eyes and answer the call of the drum. Frelimo, Frelimo, Samora Machel, Samora Machel as one. My brothers and sisters, come on and sing another chord of the drum. Frelimo, Frelimo, Samora Machel, Samora Machel has come.
So just stop right here because hopefully as you're listening, you could note that the song is Pan-African. It's a song that's celebrating the Mozambican struggle against the Portuguese colonizers for Black freedom, right? And so here you can get some sense of the kind of politics that Miriam Makeba engaged in. Okay. In the 1980s, Makeba remained exiled from her native South Africa. This was surely a result of her ongoing activism for Pan-African rights and freedom and her anti-apartheid activism, right? So she is not letting up, but it is coming at a cost, right? The accumulated years of estrangement from her family and culture, ways of being, all these things deeply hurt her. They are wounds. Adding to the pain are personal tragedies that would really rock her life. In 1978, her toddler grandson died in a tragic accident while under her care. Then in 1985, her daughter lost her baby during childbirth and then tragically died herself as a result of complications and gross medical negligence during the childbirth. So these are terrible, terrible losses. And she writes about them in her autobiography. She says this, she says, quote, No one can stop me as I scream and cry and fight against sympathetic hands. I want my family, but they are not here. They are imprisoned in the iron cage of apartheid, and they cannot travel to me, nor I to them. I cry out for my mother, for my grandmother. I cry out to Jesus and our gods to save me from this terrible pain and this terrible fear. A needle pierces my skin. Lights seem to flare and go out. The drug steals my senses, but it is as water against my grief. So you can hear the loss, and how the loss is compounded by being in exile. It's a deep mourning and lament. And to work through her grief, Makeba continued her personal and public support of activism against apartheid and the regime, and of course, doing music. Right, she's doing her shows, and by 1990, she lived to see the fall of the apartheid regime, and she was invited by none other than Nelson Mandela to return to South Africa after 30 years of exile. So she returns in 1990, and she performs to her first home crowd in decades in 1991. Ultimately, Makeba would continue performing right up until her death, right? She literally dies right after performing a concert in 2008. To her last breath, Miriam Makeba was a performer and a Pan-African liberation figure. Her life and work, it seems to me, to ask us to wrestle with the relationships between art, political power, and Black well-being in the world. Years after she passed, her son remembered that she would always say, quote, "I don't sing politics, I merely sing the truth." And I think this is a clever statement, but one well worth thinking through with some care. And so I'm going to invite us to pick this up and other things in our discussion on Thursday. But I think we have enough context for a robust discussion on Thursday. So we'll stop here for now. And so until soon, each one teach one. Peace.